everyone, I'm Kaylee from Nerdy Birdie Adventures, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books I like to reread a lot. I've read these books a lot. I'm gonna apologize now if there's any background noise. There is construction happening in the house next to us, and they're making a lot of noise, so if you can hear that, I'm really sorry. Okay, so we're gonna jump right into it. These are in no particular order, so the first one isn't my very favorite. They're, as with usual, these are they're piled up on my desk. First is Megs Aquarium. This is book number 4 in the Meg series by Steve Alton. I like all of these books, but this is the one I've reread the most. This one really focuses on Jonas's son, David. If you've read these books, they're really great. I'm a huge shark nerd, so anything that features sharks I really enjoy. I like this one the most because it really kind of starts to show the family dynamic after the sharks, the megalodons, have been around for a number of years and they're well known in the public sphere now. I like to reread this one the most just because it has a lot of drama in it. So it's sharks and drama, which makes it really entertaining to me. That one's going to be a relatively short talking point. The next book is Roddy Doyle, Paddy Clark, Ha Ha Ha. I actually read this book in high school and really enjoyed it. It's basically follows I think he's a 10-year-old boy in Ireland in the 1960s. And it's written from Paddy's point of view, the titular character. It's written from his point of view, and it basically follows a period of time in his life where things begin to change. The relationship between his mother and father starts to break down, which in Ireland at the time, divorce isn't a thing, or wasn't a thing. It was heavily frowned upon. So I like this book because of the way it keeps to how really a child would see the relationship of his parents breaking down, and how the effect it has on him, the effect it has on his little brother, and the effect it having on him has on his friends and the people around him, the way his kind of perspective changes. What else I really like about this book is, considering it's written from the point of view of a younger boy, is you feel as though a younger person has written it. It's kind of stream of consciousness, but in the sense that children don't have huge attention spans, and you get that feeling without it feeling choppy, because some books that are stream of consciousness feel really choppy. I can't say I've had that experience with this one. I really enjoy this one. So if you kind of enjoy well-written family dramas, especially from the point of view of children, I do recommend this one. It's a good story. It's very well written. It'll make you think about some things. The next author that I'm going to talk about, I actually have 3 books in this list by this author, because he's one of my favorite authors of all time. I love his work. It's fantastic. And that is Sir Terry Pratchett, the late Sir Terry Pratchett. This one is The Colour of Magic, which is the first book in the Discworld novel series, which is, I don't know how many books long now. I've loved Discworld for as long as I can remember. The TV series, the TV specials that have been made, the 2 video games. Actually, the video games is how I discovered Discworld. They were made for both the computer, and I believe the first one was available on the Sega Genesis. I don't know if the second one ever was, but I know the first one was. I think the first one may have been available for the PlayStation 2. But yeah, if you didn't know there's a Terry Pratchett video game, there is, and there's actually 2. But The Color of Magic follows Rincewind, the wizard, who gets basically roped into showing around the Discworld's very first tourist, who's called Two Flower. And it's basically the zany adventures the two of them get into. It's really cute. My favorite part of these books is Rincewind being a terrible wizard, because he read a forbidden book once, and one of the spells from that forbidden book has gotten lodged in his head. So the reason that he is such a bad wizard is because this spell scares away any other spells from staying in his head, which I just find funny as heck. But he's able to live in the Unseen University because he has one of these 8 all-powerful spells in his head. That spell also kind of sets up the secondary plot of this book and the follow-up, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is a bad wizard who wants to be the head of the Unseen University, who basically wants the spell out of Rincewind's head. So yeah, there are kind of 2 storylines going on in The Color of Magic, and the sequel, which is Rincewind's adventures with Two Flower, and then the wizard trying to get the spell out of Rincewind's head. The TV specials were made on The Color of Magic and The Light Fantastic, which is the next book. Which actually I may as well just show you. Yeah, the second book I really like. The second book of Terry Pratchett's that I really like to reread is The Light Fantastic, because you can't really read The Color of Magic and not read The Light Fantastic immediately afterwards, or at least I can't. Again, it's continuing to follow Rincewind and Two Flower. One of my other favourite parts of these books in particular, I can't remember which book specifically it happens in, but they meet Cohen the Barbarian, who is the greatest hero of the disc and is super ancient, very old. He has no teeth, at least until he gets dentures made out of troll teeth, which in the Discworld, troll teeth are made from diamond, so he has diamond dentures by the end of the books. He's fantastic. Cohen the Barbarian also features heavily in The Last Hero, with him and his Silver Horde, who are a bunch of other super ancient heroes who just want to go and flip the middle finger to the gods of the disc, which I've only read that one once, but I recommend it if you're a Discworld fan. You've never read it. It's one of the illustrated books. That leads me into the third Terry Pratchett book that I'm going to talk about, which is actually my favorite Terry Pratchett book, which is Reaperman. Reaperman follows Death, the character, the entity, the skeleton with time turners, hourglasses, that's what I was after, hourglasses in his ribcage. In the disc, if you don't know, your life is measured via a hourglass. I keep forgetting that word. Via an hourglass. And when that hourglass runs out, death comes for you. Basically, Death realizes that his hourglass, which for all time before this had never actually had sand in it, has sand in it. So, Death now has time. He's always existed outside of time. Time's never affected him. So it's what Death decides to do with himself now that he has time. And it's really such a good story. Just the way that Terry Pratchett handles Death as a character. Like, Death is my favorite character in the Discworld stories because he's such a personality. Like, if I got to choose the death that comes from me, I would love for it to be the death from Terry Pratchett. I'd love to see Death on his white horse Binky. Which, one of my favorite parts of this book is actually finding out why Death has a normal white horse called Binky, who likes sugar cubes. He goes through all the other kinds of horses that he has, and why they didn't work out, and why he now has Binky, who is just a fantastic little guy. This book also introduces the death of Rats, who is a cute character that becomes commonplace. I think he's in the Hogfather. I think you see him in the Hogfather, or at the very least there's artwork of him in his little Santa getup that Death wears in the Hogfather. But yeah, so basically Death's adventures as a normal person, he becomes Bill Dorr, essentially. He lives with an old lady who lets him sleep in the barn, and he in exchange for that, he harvests her crops because he's very talented with a scythe. I cannot recommend Reaperman enough. It tackles such an interesting subject matter so well, while also still having that tongue-in-cheek kind of entertainment that Terry Pratchett is so well known for. And just makes you think. It makes me think, like, if Death can think about the fact that he has time, it makes me think of what should I do with the time I have? What should I do with the sand in my hourglass, you know? And I like books that, like, I realize that probably sounds kind of morbid to some people, but I really enjoy it. It's such a good book. It's such a good book. I've read it so many times. Also, it's the effect of Death taking a holiday, the ripple, it also goes through the ripple effects of what happens if Death is removed from the equation, and there's just, I like the way that Terry Pratchett handled it in the sense of things don't stop dying, but the life has nowhere to go. So the life starts to manifest in some really fun ways. One of my personal favorites is the wizards, who are tasked to try and figure out what's happening, what happened to Death. Their swear words start coming to life. So if you read this book only for the description of wizard swear words, then that in itself is entertaining enough. But anyway, I could talk about this book all day. I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, so the next book is Memoirs of a Geisha. I prefer the book to the film, even though I do actually really enjoy the film Memoirs of a Geisha. As it sounds, this is memoirs of a geisha in Japan pre and post World War II, around the kind of 1930s, 1940s kind of years. I like this book. I understand this book has some controversy surrounding it, some problematic stuff, but I like the glimpse it actually gives you into another culture. I like the way that it's respectful to the culture that it is depicting. It's explained within everything that Chiyo Sayori goes through is explained from within the context of the culture. You get kind of a little bit of how do I describe it? You know, the things that she learns, why she learns them, and just a lot of the culture surrounding it, and I find that ever so fascinating. Like, I enjoy learning about Japanese culture, and I understand that this is a fictionalized take somewhat on Japanese culture, but I feel like there's enough of the actual culture in there. The fact that he did go and interview someone who lived this life kind of gives that authenticity to it that I find so interesting. But beyond that, I don't really have a lot to say about it. I really like to reread it. Like, I'll find myself rereading this every now and again. The next book is a book I actually talked about in my last video, Darksiders, The Abomination Vault. This is actually the only video game book I have in here, even though there are other ones that I read multiple times. This is probably one of my favorite video game novels, but I reread this at least 2 or 3 times a year. I really, really like it. It's not a prequel story, but a based on Darksiders story. It exists within the canon, but Angel wants to take revenge on Heaven, finds a really dangerous, powerful weapon to do so, and the Charred Council sends Death to deal with that threat. And it ends up revealing some of Death's backstory, some of the things he's been trying to keep hidden, and kind of goes a little bit into the relationship between Death and War, which War's my favourite character in Darksiders, other than Vulgrim the Demon. But it kind of goes over that. It does have some tie-ins to the game, like I mentioned in my last video. It explains kind of Death's desire to save War in Darksiders 2, but I reread it at least 3 times a year. I really, really like this book. It's very entertaining. What I do like about this is you don't need a lot of knowledge of the Darksiders universe to enjoy this. It's a really good, like I said, action fantasy story, if you like that kind of thing, like heaven and hell, angels and demons, like big weapons and, you know, supernatural powers and stuff like that, then I recommend this one, even if you've never played the games. Like, you don't need an intimate knowledge of the games to enjoy this. The next book is actually technically a poem, but it's long enough that I'm going to keep it in here, and that is The Inferno by Dante. The first part, obviously, in the Divine Comedy, Inferno, Purgatorio and Paradiso. I don't actually like Purgatorio or Paradiso that much. I have read the entirety of the Divine Comedy, but the Inferno has always been my favorite. I really like the depth of description of the punishments in hell. I also like that Dante really kind of really gave some thought onto how various sins would be punished. So, for example, those who wage war and those who spill blood in God's name are sent to the 7th circle of hell. Yeah, the 7th circle of hell for the violent. And basically they're removed from God's sight, even though they fought in his name. In the Inferno, it's mostly the soldiers of the Crusades who end up in this circle. Like, they're the most heavily featured in that section of the circle, the 7th circle of hell. I am not gonna lie, I reread this poem a lot because I like looking for various translations of obviously the Italian into English. I like seeing what subtle differences different translators pull out of it. So I think I've read about 4 different English translations of the Inferno. I've only read Paradiso and Purgatorio once a piece. But I really like this. If I had to pick a favorite circle of hell, it would probably be the 7th, but either the 7th circle or Limbo, which the virtuous pagans and unbaptized babies are in Limbo, which is technically not in hell. because it's limbo. It's counted as hell, but it's not an actual circle of hell. It's before you enter the gates of hell that you go to limbo, which, one of the things I kind of appreciate about this poem is that the leader of the Saracens from the Crusades is a virtuous pagan, which would not have been a popular thing in any form of Christian, heavily Christian societies, which Dante was alive during. So I appreciate that he includes the leader of the Saracens in that. And that brings me to my last book, which I actually only read this year and have already reread about 6 times, and that is Gils Off by A. Lee Martinez. As you can probably guess, because I've read this book 6 times in a year, I really enjoy this book. This came of the recommendation of my then fiance, now wife, who really heavily recommended that I read this, and I'm very glad that they pressured me into doing so, because I really enjoyed it. Basically, this follows a vampire named Earl and a werewolf named Duke. I'll say right off the bat, Duke is my favorite character in this book. He's adorable. I'm gonna sum him up as Fat Trucker Werewolf. That's basically how he's described, and I adore him. He's wonderful. And basically, they end up staying at an all-night diner, helping out with a bunch of weird supernatural shenanigans that turn out to be part of a bigger, potentially world-ending supernatural shenanigan. I cannot recommend this book enough. It's so funny. I wouldn't recommend it for younger children, because there's quite a lot of swearing and some sexuality stuff going on in there. But it's definitely like teen and above. It's fine. There's violence, there's some sexuality, there's nothing explicit, no like explicit sexual stuff, but it's hinted at. But mostly it's just these two dudes it starts out with these two dudes trying to help out a waitress with her zombie problem, and it just kind of devolves from there, and it's so funny. It's such a good book. Also, one of my favorite quotes of all time comes from this book, and that is, life is like a fruitcake. Pretty enough to look at, but there's some nasty stuff hiding beneath the surface. Those are my favorite books to reread. I'm not intentionally trying to become a booktuber, but books are one of the things I'm most comfortable talking about, so my first few videos are probably just going to focus on talking about books until I get more comfortable on camera. I think my next video is going to be books that I want to reread, mostly stuff that I've read recently that I really enjoyed and kind of want to go back to. And then I will also probably before the end of the year do the 20 books I read in 2020. Usually I'm a pretty fast reader, but this year's been a time, so I've only been able to get through 20 books this year, and I kind of want to talk about them. Gils Off is going to be in there because, yeah, I read that book 6 times this year. Anyway, like the video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if you didn't, I don't mind. Be kind to each other, stay healthy, and stay nerdy. Bye.